Hey Fems, I am Violet Ayala. I'm the founder of FemCity, and you are joining me today for a very special series. We are gathering today to help bridge the communication, the conversation, to better the world, to be better advocates for others. I ask that if you are joining us, that you join from a beautiful place in your heart, open-minded, with no judgment, listening, caring, with the intention of also wanting to be a part of the solution of how we can actually help the world during this time. So I ask that we are going to have an honest conversation, open dialogue. And if you have any comments or if you want to share some love, we would welcome that. This beautiful soul spirit next to me is Marsha Terry. She is one of our global members. She's a member also in the South Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I know her personally also. She's one of my, again, favorite humans. She's just always full of light, always helping others. And she's just amazing. And I invited her to join us today to have a conversation again about racism and community and how we start to heal and how we start to come together. Marsha, thank you so much for joining me. I'm honored that you're here. Thank you.
No, Violet, honestly, thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share. And when you sent me the message the other day, I was like, yes, I didn't know what we're going to talk about, but I really felt like, you have an amazing platform to be able to share with women. And I just wanted to be a part of that conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I love that you had no idea, but you said yes, which means that you trust me, right? Because if you're saying yes and you don't even know what you're getting into, that is the ultimate level of trust. So thank you so much for sharing that. How are you doing today?
Today I'm doing good. It's been a busy few days, but today I'm good. I just got some news before I got on with you today that really made me emotional, but in a very positive way, because I'm really seeing where our community is wanting to come together and support. And it just matters so much to me. So I'm really good right now. Thank you.
Good. I'm so happy to hear that. I think really my intention, I know, by the way, again, Marsha was someone that I just reached out to and she hopped on. This was something that I just created on Monday. So I am so grateful that you shifted and made time for this. And I think really the value in these conversations is to open the conversation up. I saw after yesterday's segment with Arnetta, I saw a lot of other friends that started posting about wanting to have a conversation. And it made me cry, because it was like, as someone sees others, right, trying to make it better, trying to find solutions, it opened up it allowed others to also say, you know what, I also want to have this conversation. I also want to be a part of the solution. And so that's the intention today, is just to keep on having that conversation, because I think through that we find the commonalities. We find that we are all beautiful souls. We want the world to be a better place for all of us equally. And I think that's what's so important about these conversations, is just to just talk. I just think that when we talk, it's like it also helps me to see what I can do. I'm also selfishly, I'm doing this for myself. I want to know what I can do as another human. So that is my selfish side. How are you during this time, Marsha, when we talk about the solutions that we can do? What are some things that you have found to be helpful?
So, I was really thinking about this, and I called some people that are important to me, and I shared with them I was going to be here, and I really wanted to represent my voice, but also represent their voice, because they are like me. They are Black women raising boys, or they've just experienced things in their lives. And one of the things that was common in my discussions with them is really, it starts with a conversation. I know I've shared with you before the book that I've read called The Four Agreements. It's kind of been my mantra for the year. And I think I talk about it with everybody all the time.
Candace did too on Monday, by the way. Candace did the same thing. She kept addressing it. So I bet you people are going to be like, well, I'm going to Google that today.
Yes, it's an amazing book. I read it at the beginning of every year, and I'm really grateful that I read it at the beginning of this year again. And one of the agreements is not to make assumptions. And I really feel like when we come from this place of not making assumptions about another person, it really allows you to have honest dialogue. But through the dialogue, you have to be open to hear what other people are saying. It might not completely align with you. You might not understand it. But I think when you don't have an assumption, you open the dialogue and then be ready to hear. Just listen to what people are saying. Because there's two sides to this whole racism thing that's going on. And I think because so many people are caught up in their own viewpoint that they're not willing to listen. And they've already formed an assumption about what you're going to say before you even finish your statement. So I think when you come from this place of not making an assumption about what somebody's going to say, what they're thinking, what their viewpoint is, it just leaves you open to receive, number one, and open to having that conversation and being curious about maybe why they think that way. You know, you can explain your point, and it just, you know, it brings about further conversation and dialogue at the end of the day. So I think it's very important.
I love that you mentioned, Candace mentioned this too on Monday. She was my guest on the Instagram live series that we do on Monday mornings. And she mentioned that real listening means that I'm listening to Marsha and I am not compiling a response at all in my mind. So I think sometimes, like what you mentioned right now, is that sometimes we listen and we're like building up our argument or building up our rebuttal or our response, right? That's a little bit not a response, is less aggressive, but we're building it up. But if you're building it up, the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. If you're building it up, you have stopped listening to that person. So really, when you're listening, I really highly encourage, recommend, require that you don't build up a response, because as you're doing that, you've already left the conversation. There's no point on continuing that, because if you're already kind of coming up with your stuff, you're not being present, you know, and I think people know that too. So I love that you mentioned that real listening is like just listening to what you have to say.
Yeah.
You know,
and taking a moment of pause before you respond, you know, so you can truly hear and embody what that person is saying before you just jump into the answer. Because I think when you pause, you allow it to really seep into who you are, seep into your understanding, and then, you know, take a moment of pause, and then you can respond from a much more thoughtful place, I believe.
Absolutely.
So I think it's very important that we start the conversation by listening and being thoughtful about, you know, who you're talking to and what they're saying, and just pause before you even respond to what it is that they're talking about.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And also I think sometimes if we process it, like if we pause and we just sit there for a second and process it, I think it profoundly connects us more to the conversation and the words, you know, like just processing what you said, envisioning what it must be like, walking through that scenario. You know, like yesterday, Arnetta was talking about, she doesn't have young boys, but she's the aunt of, you know, boys and, you know, the godmother. And so hearing that, listening to that, processing that, and then in my mind, feeling what that would feel like.
Yes.
Like letting it really like saturate, almost like soulfully let it saturate, so that you can really feel what it must be like to be in those shoes. I think that's also like a point that's missed, because you're, you know, so wanting to respond or like, you know, and then this or whatever it is, like just sitting there and like really feel like, you know, whether it's heaviness or grace, you know, just like feeling those words and then responding from a place of love. If you respond from a place of love, I think that it's always better.
Yes. And I think that's why, you know, what we've seen over the last few days has been so jarring, is because people were watching it and they actually were listening to the words that were being said. And I think that's what really resonated. And then you see the actions of what's happening. But, you know, I really feel like one of the ways that our voices can be heard. So last Saturday, it wasn't planned, I was in a local protest. So here in the RGV, there's not a lot of African Americans here. And truthfully, I'm from Canada. I have Jamaican parents. I moved to the United States 20 years ago. And so I never understood what racism really was from the African American perspective. Like, I just didn't get it. My husband was always like, what's wrong with you? And because I didn't understand. And it wasn't until the whole Trayvon Martin scenario that I recognized, I was like, oh, this is what it means. And because I have two boys, it hit me even harder. So, since then we talk to our children all the time about racism and differences and, just check in with them all the time about how it is their experience in school. And fortunately for us, it's been good. Like, we even had this conversation last night with my boys. My boys are like, no, mama, nobody's saying anything to us. I'm like, we just want to make sure, because we need to be able to address that situation here if it's happening, even subtly. But more importantly, I feel like one of the ways that we can start to heal our community is definitely by voting. I don't think enough people in our community are voting, and I think that they think their voices are not being represented. And so they're like, well, why should I vote? But I became an American citizen because I need to vote, because I need to exercise my right to share my concerns. And I'm to the point now that if I feel like there's somebody who is running for a spot in an election that doesn't represent my viewpoint, then I got to find somebody who does. And I'm to the point that, well, if I'm not finding anybody, then maybe it's going to be me. Because if you're not seeing that person, then you have to be the change, because it only happens when you start to get out there and be informed about what's going on in your community.
Yeah, you'd be great, by the way. Just saying. Yeah, yesterday we had, I have two young voters here at the house. And we had that conversation yesterday about voting. And, it's critical for obviously everyone to vote. We had that conversation yesterday. I was like, if you're a woman, I'm super chill pretty much all the time, but around voting time, when I hear someone who's a female who hasn't voted, I go crazy because I'm like, women were killed. Women had to, were beaten up. I mean, I get nuts. So I really hope people recognize now the value of their voice. I ran for office a couple years ago and I lost. And it was a blessing. It wasn't a good time for me in hindsight. And I think the people that won actually were better fits. I lost by a hand, like a very small amount. And so every vote counts,
right.
Like every single one. So I know also, I think that we feel like now more than ever, for whatever reason, like we feel so helpless in the voting world, but that this is the time to just, the small ones. Arnetta mentioned yesterday, vote in the small elections, the ones that people don't even think about.
Right.
Like the small ones really matter too. Don't wait for the big ones. Like do it, just be active. Even if it's difficult and hard, and you've got to stay in line for hours and you got to wear the mask and it's 6 feet apart and all that stuff. I mean, it's anyway, I don't want to go on that tangent because it's all about Black Lives Matter and it's all about having the conversation of racism, but I just want to, that's my soapbox, like vote,
Yes,
just vote.
Yeah.
How are your boys doing during this time? How are you having those conversations with them?
So, my son, I was thinking yesterday, I was telling my husband, I'm like, my oldest son is about to be 16. And so he's seen several times where this has happened over the course of his lifetime. And sadly, he's kind of like, oh, it's another incident for him because it's become so commonplace. And that's kind of scary for me because I'm like, this should not be happening. Mind you, it's been happening for years. Of course, Rodney King back in the 90s, and even before that, just we didn't have video to capture things that were happening. And so I thought for him to grow up in this era where he's like, yeah, it happens. That's not a good feeling for me. So I took him. We did go to the our local protest, and it was a peaceful protest that we had here, and it was really enriching because it was brown people, you know, that were there with their signs, that were very passionate. The police were there, and it was fine. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. And I wanted him to understand, like, this is the history of the United States. This is how change has come about in the United States, because people stood up for what they believed in. They sat in buildings. They didn't ride buses. They, you know, they were able to exert their strength, if you will, by protesting. And at the end of the day, our politicians, our leaders are going to have to pay attention to what's happening, because truthfully, it's happening globally. My sister told me that she had a friend call her from Australia and say, what is going on in the United States? My sister lives in Canada. I've had friends that have posted pictures in Vancouver of, you know, huge thousands of people that have gathered to protest what is happening in our country. It just says something about things need to change. And I believe that, as sad as, you know, George Floyd's death is and what was captured, it is, to me, a huge turning point in our country. I think there's nothing, because we saw it happen, and, you know, the reality of it and the truth of it was very jarring. And I think people are kind of fed up. Yeah. I know I am.
Yeah, I know I am too.
So,
what advice or thoughts can you share with us today on how some of us can be a part of the solution? Any advice that you have for us?
So, great question, Violet. I believe that in your areas, the easiest thing to do is get involved with a community organization. Here we have one, it's called Village in the Valley. I'm a founder of that organization, and we started it to help bridge we started it for a couple reasons. Number one, the African-American population is really spread out here. And so we wanted to have a place of connection for people to come and just meet and mingle and know each other. That was one of the reasons. But then we also have 4 pillars that are part of our organization. And to me now, when I'm thinking about the pillars, it's economic development, personal growth, community, and education. Those are the 4 pillars that I believe are instrumental in building bridges between communities and between people. So I think if you can get involved in an organization and really get to understand, like, what it is that they stand for, donate your time, donate your resources to that organization to help create awareness, that has the biggest impact. And it makes you feel good at the end of the day. It really makes you feel good. And you get to learn about people and their struggles, and you just leave with a different perspective. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that people can do, is just find something somewhere in your community. And if it's not, go online. There's a lot of different resources out there, and learn more about that organization and donate and support it and learn all you can and help spread whatever it is that they're doing with your community of friends.
Yeah. I also, I posted on Instagram yesterday a little image. I mean, it's small, so you have to take a picture of it, and then, like, you can blow it up. But it had there some links to websites that you can actually learn more about. And it also had books and movies and articles and authors that also will be a place also for you to get to know more about what you can do. I know the image is really small. I'll try to recreate it today so it's bigger, but I posted that yesterday. And yeah, just being a part and stepping forward. And I love that you mentioned, Marsha, that it feels good to do good. And I think that if you're on the sidelines and you're watching and you're thinking, like, what can I do? The reality is that, and not to be selfish, but when you do good for others, it really does make you feel good. And it makes you, I feel that it develops your spirituality. It develops, it's karmic also. Like, as you help others and you be a part of the solution, selfishly, it does feel good. I think that's why so many people, I mean, they've done studies about your happiness increases when you're a part of something bigger than yourself, when you're part of community. I mean, your happiness level goes up. So even if you're on the sidelines, I'm throwing that in. I'm throwing that in as like a little, like, extra, like, you know, be a part of the solution, have the conversations, show up, get to know your neighbors, see how you can be a part of the solution in any way that you can with what you've got. Even if you're in a very rural area and there's nothing around you, there are so many ways. If you're watching this you're blessed enough to have this, you can Google and you can get involved, even in a digital way as well. Any other tips or any thoughts that you want to share, Marsha?
You know, I was meditating this morning, and it may sound cliche, but I just feel like we just need to learn how to love people. Like, if you just love people with garlic, not looking at the color of their skin, how their hair looks, or any of that stuff, just love people for people. You know, that changes everything.
Everything.
You know, and I just feel that if people could learn how to love and really understand what love means, and be able to share that, the world would be a different place. It would be a completely different place. So it starts there, you know, the conversation, exercising your right to vote, getting involved in community, and truly loving humanity and human beings. Because we all hurt the same, we all bleed the same, we all have the same struggle, you know, in different ways, but we're all human. And at the end of the day, people just want to feel love, they want to feel supported, and they want to belong. So if we can just love one another and show it, I just feel like this, all the struggles that we're having right now would be diminished significantly.
I agree. There's a part where the last page of this book that I wrote, the last page is 12 ways on how to be a better human. And one of the tips is, when you speak to others, speak to them spiritually. Like, if you can just speak to someone spirit to spirit, soul to soul, and from a place of love, I feel like it's not that things can't go wrong. I mean, things can still go wrong, but I think it sheds away a lot of the titles, the labels, the judgments, you know, just talking spiritually to somebody else and from a place of wanting to love them, like walking into that conversation and saying, I am going to love them. I'm going to open my heart and listen to them. Just coming from that perspective. I mean, I agree with you, Marsha. Like, I know, like you said, it sounds cliche, like love is everything. Love solves everything. I mean, that's,
and
yeah.
I truly feel, Violet, that you embody that. You absolutely embody that. Exactly what you said, because that is why I was so drawn to you the very first time that I saw you. I'm like, oh, there's something different about her. But I really feel like it is because you lead from a place of love and intention and care, and really trying to elevate humankind. So thank you.
Thank you. Girl, you're making me cry. Anyway, okay, so we have some love coming in. I'm going to revert so that I stop crying. Arnetta says, I'm super appreciative of these conversations and this platform. Thank you, Violet. So Arnetta was our guest yesterday. She is our FemCity Houston leader. Sarah's typing in. Sarah is Renee Greenstein's publicist. So happy that you're here joining us. And then Amy says, I so wish I could share this with my clients. You both are amazing. Thank you, Amy. We are actually going to share this all over the place. We're going to add it to YouTube. We have it set to public. We want people to share this. We want to, I recognize that I'm very blessed that I have these beautiful women in my life. I understand not everybody does. And so that was my intention. I started thinking this weekend, I'm like, you know, I'm the lucky one. I have them in my life. I can have these conversations with them, but many people don't. And so I'm having that conversation on your behalf so that you can learn more and you can be a part of the solution. And of course, then having these beautiful spiritual women, soulful women with me to share their perspective also, so we can learn more, you know, from the different sides and different, you know, of where people are. She's in South Texas. Actually, Arnetta's in Texas too. I hadn't even thought of that. And Candace in Albuquerque. So anyway, thank you so much, Marsha. You're just light and sunshine. And I'm so happy that you're gracing us on earth and with all the beauty that you shine on others. Thank you so much for being a part of this dialogue conversation. I love you.
Well, thank you, Violet. I love you more. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back tomorrow with Lola. And we'll continue the conversation. I like I said yesterday, I promise to do what I can with what I've got to help to heal the world a little bit better so we can come together. So anyway, thank you. Bye.
Bye, ladies.